Hey guys, this is going to be a video on how I tune my drums in the style of John Bonham. I'm going to be using a drum kit similar to one that John Bonham used, 14 by 26 kick drum, 10 by 14 rack tom, 16 by 16 floor tom, 16 by 18 floor tom, and then a 6.5 by 14 snare drum. You can apply this style of tuning to any number of drum kits of any number of, or any various sizes. I've got a 14 by 22, 9 by 13, 16 by 16 drum kit that I also use this style of tuning for. Doesn't mean it applies to the style of music that you'll play. You'll have to use your discretion there. But the tuning style can be applied to any number of different size drum kits. The goal for this video is to be as thorough as possible in regards to this tuning style. I'm going to have everything down to putting the tension rods and the T-handles into the lugs themselves. I'll speed those parts up because I know it's boring as can be to watch somebody stick tension rods into lugs. But I want you to feel like if you're the kind of person like I am that needs to see every single step along the way to make sure they're getting it all. If even the most simple thing is glossed over, I feel like maybe I missed something crucial. So I'm going to speed those things up, but I've included them just so that you're seeing everything that I'm doing to get the sound that I ultimately get at the end once these drums are all put together and tuned up. The other part of the video is going to be just to hear how the drums sound as you tune them up. If you're not familiar with this style or if you haven't tried it before, the drums are going to be pitched up a lot higher than you might be accustomed to otherwise, and this is just to reassure you that you're on the right track. Same for anybody that maybe has tried this style before but didn't feel comfortable sticking with it because it didn't sound right to their ears. The drums are pitched up very high. The resonant head's going to be pitched up much higher than the batter side, but both are going to be very tuned much tighter than you may be accustomed to. You're going to get a big, fat, warm sound out of them as a result. And the key thing to remember is that after you've tuned them up and set the kit up, just to play with the proper amount of aggression. They should really sing to you once you've got them all set up together. If you got the ability to have a friend come over and play them, stand back about 5 feet, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to hear that you've got a kit that sounds every bit, hopefully, as good as John Bonham's kit sounded. So again, this style of tuning isn't going to be relevant for a lot of musical genres. I've played in blues bands or swing blues bands where the tuning needs to be a little bit tighter, a little more muffled. Same with funk. Even a lot of modern rock music has the drums tuned a little bit lower, a little bit flatter, to where they're much more punchy and record maybe a little bit better. You get more of the detail in the drums. This is going to be a style of tuning that's, again, specifically for Zeppelin-like projects where you get a little more of a roomy sound. You can close mic these and they'll still sound amazing. They'll still sound great. You get the resonance of the toms and the tone of the kick drum, which I think is oftentimes lost. It gives you a lot more personality to the songs. And I think anytime a song has the drums as a predominant personality or identity of a song, it's a great, amazing thing. Good example, most recently, is a song by the Rival Sons called Open My Eyes. Very much in the vein of When the Levee Breaks. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend checking it out. Those drums are tuned nice and big and open. Big roomy sound, and they sound incredible. Great job by those guys to utilize a drum tone similar to John Bonham. So that's going to be the goal, is just to go through this to reassure you, not necessarily to hold your hand, but if you're familiar with it and weren't comfortable, this is to reassure you. If you're not familiar with the style and you want to give it a try, just to give you a step-by-step process along the way of how I do it myself, which I think is pretty similar to how Bonham did it and how any number of people probably online are suggesting you do it. So here we go. So we'll start with the 14 by 26 kick drum. I'm also going to be working with the resonant side heads first. You can certainly start with the batter side heads, but the reason I'm doing the resonant head is because I believe that's what people hear most, and if you get the pitch and the tone on that properly adjusted first, it's much easier to get the batter side dialed in afterwards. So the resonant side head is going to be what I focus on with all the drums first. It also makes it easier to tune the whole drum kit to itself and have everything properly intonated. So resonant side heads first. At this point, all I'm doing is going around trying to get equal tension on all the T handles and going into all the lugs. You definitely want to make sure you get those as even in pitch as possible. You'll start to hear what the drum sounds like shortly. But the closer you can get them sounding to each other, the less overtone, the less ringy the drum will actually be. The drum head's still going to resonate quite a bit, but you won't get any funky overtones and that excessive ringing if the drum's not really tuned properly. Again, resonant head is going to be pitched much higher than the batter side is. Drum head, I'm using a 70s Ludwig single ply drum head. I think the equivalent nowadays is just a smooth white single ply head, either by Remo, Ludwig, any number of drum companies. And you're going to be able to hear how tightly tuned the drum really is. Apologize for the buzzing. It's just loose hardware. Yeah, the cymbal mount has a nut that's not fastened down properly, so that's buzzing a little bit. Emphasize taking your time with this, especially if you've taken all the drum heads off. There's no reason not to be as detail-oriented as possible. You've got a little more forgiveness with the bigger drums in terms of not having them be as close to each other as possible. Once you get to the smaller drums, they're a little less forgiving, so you're going to want, especially the snare drum. So there you have the resonant head on the bass drum. We're going to switch over to the batter side now. And I'm going to be using a Remo coated Emperor for that, as well as a felt strip to go across the bottom. That's going to be the only muffling I have really on any of the drums, and that's simply to control the sound off the batter head a little bit. It'll cut down a little on the resonance of the drum, help it make it a little more punchy and cut across, especially if you mic these drums up. It'll help a great deal with that. So again, once we get the hoop on, there's no real need to worry about making sure that's too tight right now. You'll get the hoop on, you'll start tightening down the T handles, and as you do that is when you really want to make sure the felt strip is flush with the batter head. But at this point, there's no need really in worrying about having that be too tight. So put the T handles in again. As I put them in, I'm going to tighten them with my hands to the point that they start to give a little resistance. Then I'm going to go diagonally across from each other. I'll go with one, and then I'll go to the opposite end of the drum and tighten that, and then go to the side from there and tighten that, and then go to the other side from there, and just make my way around, trying to skip over lugs so that there is an even distribution of tension throughout. It's the easiest way to get things going, and then make fine tuning adjustments from there. So again, this is where you pull the felt strip tight. The batter head is not going to be tuned as highly as the resonant head. Again, trying to get it as evenly tuned as possible around the whole drum. I think there might be some syncing issues with the video and the audio. I apologize for that. batter head. Buzz. And that's the kick drum. All right, so we'll move on to the 10x14 rack tom. Again, I'm going to be starting with the resonant side here. It's going to be pitched up higher than the batter side will be. I'm going to be using a Remo coated ambassador on the resonant side head. As you move into the smaller drums here is when you're really, again, you're going to want to pay attention to detail in terms of making sure you've got things evenly tuned all the way around the drum. The less you can get, the more evenly pitched you can get the whole thing, the better it's going to sound. You're not going to get funky overtones, any excessive ringing, or wonky like darkness, I guess is the best way to describe it. Again, in my opinion, especially with the drums being tuned this way, this is where you're going to, what the audience or what the recording is going to pick up if you're doing more of a room sounding recording. The batter side is you'll get the strike there, but the tone, overall tone, is going to be dictated. And I think, again, you guys should know I'm not the most technically savvy drummer in the world. I'm not formally trained in any way. So a lot of this is just like jargon that I picked up either by listening or reading. I hope I'm not too far off. But for people that are far more educated in the world of drums and percussion, I apologize if I'm misusing any terms. But yeah, I think the resonant side is what dictates the tone more than anything. And so you want to make sure that is dialed in as much as possible, tuned up a bit more. Batter side's not going to be tuned. Again, that's going to get the strike of the drum, kick things off. But the resonant side, the better off you've got that evenly tuned, the better the drum is going to sound to the people that are listening to it. The same thing on this. The nut that's attached to the tom mount isn't fastened down, so there's going to be a little buzzing. I apologize again for that. Cool. So we got the resonant side down. Move on to the batter side. It's going to be a Remo coated Emperor. Again, 14-inch drum head. I haven't got new drum heads for the toms in particular. I like the way the old ones sound. So I've stuck with those. I do have a new drum head for the snare. But yeah, for these, you don't really need to have anything too pristine and sparkling. So again, going around, tightening everything up with my hands to the point that they start to give resistance, and then I'll move on to the drum key and give it a few turns each on each side. You'll start to feel the resistance. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be evenly tensioned in terms of what it feels like all around. Again, that's why you go around and see what the tone's like. Again, Again, batter head's not going to be quite as high as the resonant head, but it's going to be tuned up much higher than you might be accustomed to. Almost like a timpani in a way. I recommend you experiment. Try tuning it a little bit lower. Depending on the environment in which you're playing, especially, a big reason they used this style of tuning back in the day is because drum miking wasn't as advanced as it is now. So you want those drums to really cut across the music and be nice and big and open and sing. Cool. So we'll move on to the 16 by 16 floor tom. It's going to be the same more or less as the 10 by 14, same as the 16 by 18 will be, and even pretty much the same as the snare drum will be. Starting off again, we've got a Remo coated ambassador on the resonant side head. It's going to be pitched up much higher than not much higher, but higher than the batter side is going to be. It's just flat. I've tuned everything by hand up to this point. Now I'm going to move on to the drum key and start making adjustments from there. Usually give everything 2 or 3 good twirls on the tension rod. Moving from side to side, trying to make sure the tension is evenly distributed from the get-go, so that it's that much easier to fine-tune everything once you got them all dialed in. Take up any slack just in case. Again, with this one being a little bit bigger, you've got a little more margin for error. It all doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're doing this, do your best. No reason to go through this whole process and not get it as close as possible. I apologize. Every once in a while the camera died the day I was recording this, so if it cut out, I don't mean to be cutting out any particular step. I might have tuned it a little bit higher in between that cut. We've got the pitch to where I want it to be now. Batter side, Remo coated Emperor. And again, I'm going through. That's just with the tension rods hand tightened up to this point. Now I'll go through with the drum key and start giving them a whirl. Batter side is not going to be tuned as high as the resonant side. Just a bit under. I've heard people talk about, having the resonant side tuned up a third higher than the batter side. I have no... Sure, that's probably a good reference to shoot for if your ears can measure things out in terms of those ratios. That's a third is a good thing to shoot for. Again, trying to get even tensioning on each respective area of the drum. Buzzing you're hearing is the wing nuts that are on the floor tom leg mounts. Again, I apologize for that part of things. Put the legs in, move on to the 16 by 18. All right, so the 16 by 18 will be same as the other drums. We're going to have a Remo-coated ambassador on the resonant side. Resonant side head is going to be tuned up higher than the batter side is going to be. We'll go through, hand tighten all the tension rods, and then we'll move to... There's the flat hand-tuned drum so far, and we'll move on to the drum key and start getting this thing dialed in. I will say I'm awfully proud of how this one ended up turning out when I was done with it. I don't use the 18-inch drum as often as the other ones, but of all the times I've ever tuned this one up, I think I got it as close to what I was hoping for as I ever have. Primarily, yeah, I'm very happy with how it sounded. Unfortunately, I also used the crappiest mic on this one because I don't use it as often, and so I don't think it's properly represented. But just from me to you, I'm happy with how this one sounds. Right, batter side, Remo-coated Emperor. It's totally flat. Only hand tighten up to this point. Get the drum key in there and give it a couple twists on each lug. Boring, hopefully relevant for some of you guys for comfort's sake of being able to see almost all of it. All right, so 16 by 18 floor tom. Get the legs in that, and we'll move on to the snare drum. All right, so the LM402 6.5 by 14 snare drum. Love this snare. I can definitely see why John Bonham used it. Using this tuning style, like I think I'm definitely of the opinion, with my very limited experience compared to quite a few drummers out there that probably have a more formed opinion than I do, that you could take any number of snares from the cheapest of the cheap to the the best of the best, most expensive, and get a relatively good sounding snare. It's all about the tuning. I'm going to be using a Ambassador hazy snare on the resonant side. It's an old snare head. It came with the snare drum. It's from New York, and a shop in New York, I should say. And I like the stamp on there, so that's part of why I'm keeping it. I'm sure there would be a little more life out of a new one. If I were to get a new one, it would be, again, a Remo Ambassador, just a hazy snare head. And same thing. This is where you really want to spend some time focusing in, making sure everything's as tuned, as close all around as possible. The snare drums in particular, especially the Superphonics, are renowned for how ringy they can be. That can be very desirable depending on the style of music, or it can drive people nuts, especially as you go to mic these up and all you hear is the dong, dong. So you're going to cut down on a lot of those overtones, a lot of the ringiness, if you've got the drum tuned appropriately to itself. You want to make sure there is even tension all around, really spend an extra amount of time. Again, snare drum is one of the most prominent elements of any drum kit in any music, almost any music. So you want to make sure that if you need to spend 30 minutes on the snare drum, be that parody, spend 2 years getting the right drum sound for your snare drum. It shouldn't be that difficult though. So yeah, make sure even tension all around, especially on the resonant side. Resonant side is going to be tuned up again, higher than the batter side is going to be. If I had to put some kind of description to the way the snare drum is tuned, it's definitely, I've got mine as like a medium high tuning. You're going to get that nice crisp crack. There's going to be a little ring, a little overtone, but that's desirable. I think that's indicative of a lot of like Bonham stuff. Even if you can't hear it, especially more live recordings, there is a bit of ring to his drums. As you move to a more room sounding snare, room sounding recording, you're not going to hear a lot of those overtones. But the medium high, you're going to have a little ring, but you're still going to get that nice crisp crack and good response off the snare drum. The batter head is going to be a Remo coated Emperor. And again, we've gone through, tightened everything up with hands first, and now I've moved on to the drum key and am jumping around the drum, making sure there's even tension all around. squeak. Sounds like I'm actually making it worse. It all comes around. All right, get the snare drum on there, and we'll move on to the whole kit. All right, so we got the whole kit set up now. I'm going to go through some of the hardware that I'm using, and just you can see how the whole thing is set up. In particular, the decal, I want to go over that real fast because some people might ask. I just made it myself. If you go on line, Google, Bonzo symbol or Led Zeppelin symbols, you can find vector-based images that you can scale to a 26-inch kick drum if you have it a 24, 22, whatever you want. But you can go through and take that to a printer that prints out decals or stickers and just have one made yourself. I think I paid about $50 for mine, which, again, isn't the most affordable thing in the world, but it's better than paying somebody online $100 for the exact same thing. Love those old rail mounts to connect the rack tom. I think aesthetically it just looks great, but they're also nice and solid and sturdy. Using a WFL Speed King pedal, same as the Ludwig Speed King pedal, just an earlier model. It has two hinges that actually prevent the pedal from sliding forward too much, which is the difference between the Ludwig Speed King and the WFL. We got the Rogers Swivel-matic hi-hat stand, which great smooth action on that thing. I can see why Bonham used it. Much better than the Atlas hi-hat stands that they had at the time. Going through, got the tone control knobs on each of them of the toms. If you ever get any rattling, I just recommend either putting some cotton or tape or underneath the felt inside of the tone control knob, and then either taping that down or just hoping that that stays in place. I've had the cotton slide out every once in a while, and then you get this bouncing around. So I'd recommend taping it down. That way you can keep them in and still use them. The Portomatic drum throne, amazing design and also amazingly uncomfortable. Like things like sitting on a plank of wood. And I don't know if they were the same back in the 60s or whether this one is just kind of deteriorated over time. But I love the design, the three legs, nice and classic, very sleek, very easy and compact to take apart and put together, but just wildly uncomfortable. But for the purist aspect of things, I keep it. So there's the kit. Now we're going to move on to the drums without any effects on them. Now we'll have drums with a little reverb and just minor EQing on the snare and kick drum. Use this last part of the video to go about mic placement. In particular, the kick drum head. When you don't have a port, I know it drives a lot of sound guys nuts. All you have to do is, at least I was told this, and it seems to work pretty well for me, move the mic about 6 to 8 inches away, give the sound wave a little more time to form. You still get a nice, beautiful, rich, warm tone and attack without a bunch of resonance on the head. Pretty easy fix. Standard mic placement on the toms and standard mic placement on the snare drum. I'm using an SM57 on the snare drum. Solely on the batter side. I don't have anything on the snare drum head at this point. I've never been particularly fond of like the dry sound you get with that unless it's mixed really well. And as seeing as how I don't have any proper training or formal education on engineering, audio engineering or mixing, I've stayed away from that. So it's a fun experiment. I don't know exactly what I'm doing when it comes to sound and mixing and all that. And so take what I say with a grain of salt. But it's been a good time putting these videos together and trying to up the production value a little bit as time has gone on. So I really appreciate you guys watching this, spending all 40 minutes or at least little parts of it here and there for things that may have been more relevant to what you're looking for. It's been a fun thing to try and put together, as simple as it is. I hope it answered questions that people may have had. If you're new to drums or new to tuning, that it's filled you in a little bit more on how to get this particular style of drum sound. Apart from that, if you guys have any questions, just shoot me a comment below and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. I'll keep the videos coming. Thank you again for all your support and encouragement, and for anybody that's asked for this, here you go. I hope it lived up to your whatever you needed it to be. I'll see you guys all again in the not too far off future. See you.